Hi, Smita. Thank you for joining me on Let's Grow Young. I should say that I've had a response from my listeners and my watchers on YouTube and Spotify to go weekly with this podcast. And you are the first of those weekly guests. And so I'm hoping it's going to be a special episode. And very agilely, I'm responding to the listeners by bringing guests on every week, which is going to be a challenge for me, but I give you the honor of being my first guest.
Oh, thank you so much. And may I be your lucky mascot?
Hopefully so. I think we're going to talk about energy and karma in a bit, so maybe it was just your karma that was already coming through. So to introduce you, Smita, and I should say you're almost a neighbour of mine, and we didn't actually know that until I think you'd heard one of the podcasts and you reached out to me. It turned out that we're actually neighbours, and we had a coffee at my local gym just to get to know each other.
Mine too, by the way. I've been going there for the last, since it opened. Since it opened in around just before 2000.
And have you been since the refurbishment?
Yeah, I'm kind of in and out there, yeah.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. That's another topic. I'm upset about the refurbishment, but that's a coffee conversation.
Oh, so, funny enough, Sanjeev, that before the refurbishment is where I wrote the books. I literally sat in that restaurant in the corner there. Wow. And that's where all three of my books were actually written, which was like, a very special place. So when they actually knocked it down and made it into what it is now, it was like, oh, but it was such a nice space. But yeah, okay, things changed.
Amazing. So I'm going to try and summarize who you are, Smita, and what you do. But what I've actually found is that there's so much that you do, and there's so many strands to your coaching, your background. So I'm pretty confident I'm going to fail quite bad at summarizing it, but I'm going to try my best. And if I do fail, do jump in and add in any bits. So the way my research points is that, let's start off with the fact saying that you're an award-winning author. One of the books is Karma and Diamonds. I would love to understand what that title means eventually and how the two are related. You're a yogi. We'll explain later what a yogi is. You're a yoga teacher. Much like me, you've also worked in the corporate background with a global organization, and you've then become a transformation coach. Your books have been, as I understand it, inspired by your own events, and now I know they were inspired by David Lloyd Gym in Northwood as well, where you were sipping coffees and probably watching the people there and making notes. I'm really keen to talk to you about a number of things, as an avid yogi as you are, and also about your studies and the rigors of your practice. So today, there are a number of things that I want to talk about, things which, to be frank, I feel as a person of my background, of a Hindu background, I've probably not paid that much attention to in the past. And stuff like karma, stuff like chakra. What is it? It intrigues me. Am I getting closer to it in my life? I think you're very close to being committed to physical and spiritual alignment. And you've mastered a number of ancient texts to underpin your learnings. And you're obviously very active at yoga. I saw an Instagram video of you yesterday doing some yoga poses, which I could not even imagine doing. So in amongst all that, I think we have so much to talk about, Smita. How's that as an attempt, as a summary of who you are?
Oh, thank you. You're so kind. Thank you so much, Sanjeev. The important thing is the important thing for me is, what does it all mean, what you've done up till now? What does it all mean? My purpose with why we're talking and why I do any of the things that I do is really about integrating, the inner world and the outer world, the material and the spiritual. And because my own, as you mentioned earlier, my background, one aspect of it is 25 years in hardcore corporates. And working at the senior sort of board member level, winning large scale multi-million-dollar businesses. and running, also managing clients across continents and so on. And I tell you, one of the things that I have learned along the journey of what I call self-discovery, self-discovery with a capital S, and I don't mean self-discovery as in who am I at the level of, what are my likes and preferences and so on, but that level of the higher consciousness, which is in Sanskrit called Atman. My purpose for anything that I'm doing today is really to bring that as being my bigger reality as opposed to my physical reality, which is for most of us what rules our day-to-day consciousness, as in like what we do in life, the kinds of friends we have, the kind of work we do. But for me, the realization came so very early on that who I am is literally consciousness in a tiny little body with a tiny little spark of that consciousness landing in the physical body that we call the human being. And the whole point of as I understand it, and by the way, you said I've mastered certain ancient texts. I don't think I've mastered anything. I think I'm always learning, developing. I just, the more I get to know, the more I realize how little I know. So please, thank you. I appreciate that. But I humbly decline that sort of label. But the point is to really integrate. How can we bring who we are in our inner essence and have that guide every little decision in our life? Even, for example, yesterday there was an event that was going on. I was invited to. It was a very prestigious event. An award ceremony was a part of it, and I somehow didn't make it. I had other things that I just couldn't let go, as in like I couldn't change my plans. And this morning I woke up and I thought, why would I let myself miss that? How is that possible? But I know that the whole point of this journey that I have committed to and that I bring to you and in my conversations is to listen to that higher essence, that inner voice, and allow that inner voice to be my guide in every second of every day, even when my mind, my intellect, my ego says, you should have been there. How could you miss that opportunity? There were so many people that you would have loved to have, to met and you want to meet and all the rest of it. And then I realized that I've never yet, very few times in my life that having committed to aligning with that higher self, with that the higher consciousness that I am, having learned to communicate with it, having learned to listen to it, having learned to be guided by it, never have I been misguided. So if it means that I miss something, even though I was so privileged to have that, invite, there's probably, in hindsight, we'll probably see why that needed to be. So my purpose of everything that I'd like to be known for as an introduction is somebody who, in listening to me, you will end up with more freedom, more inner freedom, with more peace, with more joy. And, most of all, whatever I talk about, I want it to be an opening, like a flash or some catalyzation. My energy, how it lands, it somehow catalyzes your and whoever's going to have the benefit of listening to this podcast to suddenly have not just insights, but breakthroughs and maybe epiphanies where they are never the same again, because something was said, something was shared, something was communicated in a way that landed for them.
I get that. So I'm not going to go into my experience of when I started listening to my inner self, but it created a total change. How does one go about listening to their inner self? I mean, in layman's terms, it's how do you listen to yourself? What is the art of doing that? What are we supposed to listen out to? And what are the feelings and sensations that that we should be, watching out for. So I guess, how do you listen to yourself?
So, really deep, good question. And here's why. The sages of ancient India and many other philosophers across the world, many other spiritual leaders, spiritual leaders, people who have, given their lives to self-realization and self-actualization, they have spent so much effort in communicating, first of all, what this self is that we're talking about. The self that we're talking about is not the self with the small s, the local mind, the intellect, which is very valuable, by the way, and we need it to help us to be in action in the world, because physical material existence, whether you do big things or small things in life, you're always doing something every second of every day. Even if you're sitting there or if you're sleeping, that's still doing something. So they have given us all of this gyan, all of this knowledge. And the reason why the question is so amazing is because we still haven't figured out what they were trying to tell us. And part of the reason is that this field of consciousness, this Atman, this Brahman that we're talking about, or Brahman, is so vast and so subtle that it doesn't intrude and impinge on the gross material reality that we are present to on a day-to-day life. For example, here's my cup of tea, it's warm, it's a certain temperature, there's a certain amount of sunlight outside, there's all these objects around me. So it's very easy to get drawn and, lost in those, in all of those. Then we have our physical human existence, where the body has its own, chemicals and hormones and all kinds of other things that are happening inside of us that actually we don't realize how much impact they have on our view of life. For example, any woman who has gone through becoming pregnant, will know just what happens when the body does the chemical thing that it does in order to grow a baby. And any woman who has gone, or a man who has had a change of later life, where a whole bunch of hormones decline and, the things that we could do so easily that we were able to just not even think about become so much more different, and so on. So we are constantly bombarded by internal physiological things going on and external material worldly things going on, so with people and so on. So listening to that inner voice is a challenge from the point of view of, first, we don't know what that inner voice actually is. Where does it come from? We don't understand the realm of consciousness that Atman is. So it's very tricky to then distinguish that apart. And the other element of this is the challenge that, if you were to add to it, was that we have all of our mind, our mental conditioning and the past and everything that has made us, arrive where we are today, that is telling us certain things like, we are conditioned a certain way. We're machines in some ways, given by that conditioning. As emotionally intelligent as you might be, as transformed as you might be, as aware, self-aware as you might be with your knowledge, knowing, contextual knowing, conceptual knowing, even if you're really trained as a human being to observe these things and to know that they're happening, there's still a certain element of not being able to not be given by them. For example, if you have an ambition to achieve something and then you see other people achieving that very same thing and you somehow are struggling with it and you don't understand because you're better, you're more talented, you're more skilled. So there's all these thoughts and things that are going on in the mind. And you think all of that we need to contend with, right? So listening to that inner voice, first, we do need to recognize what gets in the way of that inner voice. First, we need to recognize what that inner voice is not. And it's not all those things. It's not your ambitions. It's not your thoughts. It's not your past conditioning. It's not even your transformed presence, because sometimes subconscious things happen, and it comes and triggers you, you know, and suddenly we get given by, we're sucked into that whirlpool of the mind. Patanjali called it the world. Sage Patanjali, 300 circa BC. He's very well known for his Yoga Sutras. He literally took all of what was known and predominant in the thought at the time about understanding higher consciousness and human beings and human consciousness. And he went from aphorism 1. Sutra means a thread, actually, and we call them in English aphorisms. So there's about 192, 194 aphorisms, from starting from 1 to that one, the one at the end. And he takes you from the very beginning. And if already in the second phrase, he already tells you how to, and I'm going to tell you how we do this, by the way, giving you a little bit of preamble. And he goes straight into telling you how you go from being human into your most divine, who you are, at your highest consciousness, and your true reality, which is the unchanging, the eternal, as they say. And I don't believe it. I have a knowing of it. I know that to be so. It's my reality.
Can I just ask you on that? Sorry to interrupt. Can you generally really reach your highest consciousness in the everyday world we live in, or do you have to be living as some sort of monk, excluded from the world, on top of a mountain somewhere, no TV, internet? Is it actually possible to reach that abundancy in amongst the Western world we live in?
Or Eastern. In fact, the Eastern today, is even more ambitious and even more in a go get, catch up and go get and so on. So, anywhere in the world, I think any human being. Well, I'd say, Sanjeev, to that, I think it's never been any different. The whole purpose of life, as human life as we know it to be, as far as I can tell, as far as the Shastras, the ancient texts, are saying, the overall purpose of life is to get that realization, and to keep getting that realization to the point where it becomes your reality. And this is why the sages have always said we have, we keep coming back in human form. We keep coming back. What interestingly enough, I've had a reel go viral on Instagram recently. Some 730,000 views. I don't know, some 16,000 likes, some 1,600 comments, and so on. And
you're going to get one more comment, one more like, and one more view after this one.
That'd be so nice. Everyone matters. And what that is about reincarnation. So I give three tips as to, where you might be on your last reincarnation. If maybe one of these things is happening, or all three of them are happening. And people really resonate with that, because at some fundamental level, people know that we have this existence beyond the now. So we keep coming back in human body, or another, I don't know, elsewhere in the great infinite universe, I don't know. But the point is to realize that. So the reason why the two questions you asked so far are really, really, really deep. Although one can say, it's cliche to ask that question, but they are absolutely so, so deep, is because the whole point of our life is to keep coming back until we realize enough that we are not our mind, we're not our body, we're not our feelings, we're not our thoughts, we are not our temporary reality, that who we are on a vastness of who the lion's share of who we are is that consciousness. And then we keep being drawn to exploring that somehow. We keep finding it's magnetic. Once you tap into it, Sanjeev, would you agree? It's a little bit magnetic. You want to know more?
It totally is. It totally is.
And the more we go into it, the more we discover ourselves. So is it possible? I'd say it is possible. So long as you also include and don't diss the human form that we are, the human reality that we have, because that human reality is a privilege. Krishna has always said in the Gita, he says it several times, that human incarnation is you have to arrive at a certain level of consciousness in order to be able to come into this form, because it takes something to be in this form. So I believe, I say believe is a weak word. I say, for me, that's the truth in my world, that it is possible. And it's a journey, and it's a journey of many lifetimes, perhaps. And it's really, really the only journey at the end of the day, because everything you do, whether you want to earn money, whether you want to have children and experience happiness that way, it all comes down to experiencing that state of creativity, creation, and manifesting. Because that's who we are.
And understood. I mean, all of that is really, really deep. And I think if my mum was listening, and she uses words such as gyan a lot, she'd be really happy to be hearing this. But for me, there are words being mentioned here which I think at some point, maybe even as part of the show notes, we will outline what they are. So you've used terms such as gyan, which is knowledge, shastra, which is the ancient scripts, atman, Brahman, words that maybe I should really know the meaning of. And so I think I think it's really important just for the listeners that we will provide some show notes on what these words mean. But I think they all have a modern day meaning and a modern day relevance.
And Sanjeev, the reason why I'm using the words is because sometimes the translation is not available so completely, and it's really good if we can be authentic with our sources of where we are, what we're referring to, where are we gaining, where am I coming from, and how deep that source is. It's not a source of, new age. New age is given by that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not the source of, the source goes back pre-written down days.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to ask you right now live for a bit of a coaching session, because something you referred to earlier about the higher consciousness, and you're almost referring to disappointments that aren't really that important, and other things that are probably much more important, especially in the corporate world. What happened to me was I was getting overly affected by disappointments in the corporate world, and it was beginning to have an impact on everything around me. Family, friends, my physical and emotional health, until I actually had a bit of a breakdown. Since the breakdown, I've tapped much more into my consciousness, much more into my inner self. And I've almost gone to the other extreme, Smita, where something happens and people are expecting me to react. I'm almost expecting myself to react. But I think I've picked up some sort of gut brain reaction, which is kind of contextualizing everything for me from a much more conscious perspective. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I seem to have gone from here to here, and I'm trying to actually come a bit more here. Is this normal when you start connecting to your consciousness? It's like even my wife would say to me, "Are you going to react?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to, but I just don't see the relevance of it."
See, this is what happens. So Sanjeev, if you think about anything you've learned in your life that you've actually been deeply passionate about, take, for example, your fitness, right? You probably started in a place where you were so unconscious of all of that. At some point, it becomes something that you realize you need to do, so you do it. And then you enjoy it so much, or you get so much value from it. It makes such a profound impact on you that you then go and you devote more time and more energy and more focus, and you absorb everything you can about, that realm of that world of fitness that you're in. And then suddenly it takes over your life. And this is very much the same. And the challenge we have and why I talk about integration of the material and the spiritual is exactly for that reason, that we are living in a material world. And yet, when we start to learn, when anyone learns something, they have no choice but to give an inordinate amount of attention and focus to that aspect of their life in order to have it become something that they become good at, that they master. And so it does, we, in any area, okay, in any area at all, not just in this one that we're talking about. So we do tend to kind of go from nothing to everything, and then we realize that people are complaining. People feel that you're not responding in a way that has you connect with them and have rapport with them.
Yeah.
So 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 it gives them the impression you're so detached. In fact, I've done a number of videos on detachment, okay, most recently for a new television platform that's being launched out of Hollywood called Ethereal TV. And it's really about understanding how detachment works, is that it's not about becoming uncaring. It's not about not taking responsibility. It's not about being aloof. It's a state, it's a way of being, it's an emotional intelligence which we develop, where we learn to discern better what deserves our attention, what doesn't deserve our attention, what deserves attention enough because we live in the world, so that you are now choosing to react with a certain emotion.
Sorry, you've described that so well, because that is exactly where I am right now. I'm like, exactly what you just described. I'm in that space and I feel so good for it. But then people will say, well, he's not reacting. But I kind of know when I need to react. And so I think a lot of people close to me are pretty shocked. They're like, wow, in Hindi, they say, isko kya ho gaya? What's happened to him? Right? But then maybe they will see that little fire. I call it fire. I've come from 20 years of banking. So that little fire is still there just when I need it. But I'm preferring this self of me over anything, if I'm honest.
Exactly, because it gives you more power. See, true Shakti, the Shakti is that inner power that we have, that feminine power that sparks all of creation. Because you can have a thought, but a thought is nothing without the spark of action, the spark of doing, the spark, that heat of doing, making that thought into a thing. So it does really go like that. And the whole purpose is to be able to be conscious. You are becoming more conscious, where before you reacted as an automatic. It was an automatic given by your subconscious. It was just a programming that you had. Now you're adding a plugin, and the plugin decides how you actually apply certain features of that plugin. So now you've got, and then eventually you don't need that plugin, because you've now got an upgrade. You're now going to next version is you upgrade to a version of yourself where that plugin is nicely integrated. It's not something you have to switch on and off. Okay. There's an integration taking place. This is precisely why I started out by saying what I want to be known for. If I have any contribution to make in the world, if I'm bringing anything at all as an introduction, is that my work is about helping people and empowering people to really integrate their inner source, the inner power, and the external world. So let's take an example, or give me an example where you have had people are treating you a certain way or behaving a certain way around you, and that it's not on to behave that way. Or give me an example where you've had a situation where.
I think I think if I play this in a way that I was probably the one behaving inappropriately a few years ago, overly aggressive in delivering stuff, over with too many overly hyped expectations, wanting bigger this, bigger that, brighter this, brighter that, bigger holiday this, better holiday that. I was that person, and so, but what happened to me was exactly what you described about. I'm trying to find the words that you used. Exactly what you described about the external world. I realized that this hedonic treadmill is a constant treadmill. You know, they put something around your head and you can't reach it. It's a bigger car, can't reach it, and then you finally jump and get there. Then another bigger car comes, and you can't reach it. So to me, what I learned was to rip out that stuff out of my head, throw it away to an extent, as long as I'm still providing very well, but replace them with values that really matter around care, attention, trying to be the best person you can. And so for me, that's my example. Another example is I actively choose not to go out anymore. So I'm going out tonight, but what I mean is the circles I used to hang around with, I choose to say no. I choose to say no, and I choose to be more conscious about how I want to feel the next day. One big example, one small one, and it makes me feel great.
And Sanjeev, I'd like you to consider that maybe ripping something out is not necessarily the solution, but to honor that part of you that had all of that, that where you were then, and to bring that with you and integrate that, because the more we use language even, and the more we use visuals, where we can't be with certain things. We need to accept it all. The past, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Allow it to be as it is, when none of us are perfect. And we came, and I want you to consider maybe that was the reason why you had to go through that path,
Absolutely.
So that you are a powerful person. I mean, you individually are a powerful human being. That you're able to create a lot, to make things happen, bring into existence things that perhaps were not happening, before. That takes a certain amount of focus, energy, power, and determination and intellect. And, that power is still there. It just is that we need to find other avenues for expression, for its expression. And if you were to bring that with you, then that part of you that was Sanjeev back then can also feel good about himself. He feels accepted. We don't reject anything. We don't reject anything. We don't rip anything out. We allow it to be, and we get informed by that. Let that inform, you in other ways that it's informing you now. And you can honor that part of you, because boy, that Sanjeev worked really hard to, have the privilege of having the life that you have today, and the privilege of hosting a podcast as valuable as this, to have the resources to do that, to have the awareness and the pitfalls and everything else. It's such a valuable lesson. So
I love
it is.
this. Yeah.
It's really important. And what you're talking, what happens is, as we evolve, is we do realize that the whole evolution is about coming to choice. It's all about having choice where we didn't feel we had it before, or we didn't operate from choice before. So nowadays, I know that if I'm really choosing, I choose sometimes to have words with someone. I choose it, but I choose it, and how I will do that is by really being clear and being straight, but being compassionate, and knowing that there may be a fallout with that. There may be that, we are no longer going to have something to work with following that conversation, but but not being attached to that. Because when you are value driven, as you are, clearly working yourself into a life of values, and choosing from your value set what's important, what's priority, then what happens is that sometimes you suddenly arrive at a place in a relationship that you've had for 20 years somewhere. It might be with someone who's working for you or whatever, where things that you accepted and sort of tolerated because of the need of having that person around or something suddenly becomes untenable.
Yeah.
It's just no longer something you can be with. It becomes unacceptable. And so you then say, gosh, I completely understand if, this is not going to work for you, but this is where I'm at.
Yeah. So I've taken that into my corporate life, and it really works well. I could talk about this part of this episode forever, but and it's so deep and interesting. I think we can do some more episodes on this particular part. There's so much more I want to go into though, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to go to Sadhguru. Now, I listened to your interview with Sadhguru. I've listened to some of your other podcasts. What struck me was that you were speaking with Sadhguru before all this Instagram, craze. I don't want to use the word craze with such a spiritual man, if I'm honest, but I was trying to find another word. But my point here is that Sadhguru's lessons and learnings are all over the place at the moment, and some people are even plagiarizing his learnings. But what I found in your interview with him was that you were actually connected with him a long time ago. And what are the things that you took from your discussions with Sadhguru? And you could probably go on about this for ages, but if you were to pick 2 or 3 key things that you took from him, not just by what he said, but by being in his presence, what would those things be?
I was going to say that was the biggest thing, really, is being in his presence. What I took from him is his profound clarity. He has such clarity about what we're talking about. So the essence of life, the consciousness element. Because consciousness is so difficult to articulate. I asked him questions like, the things like, we talk about gods, we talk about, all of these devis, devtas, and so on. Are they real? Are they archetypes? How do they live? How do they exist? And, it was a really deep question for me to want an answer to, because I have an experience of these things in my own way. And I had a feeling that he was going to say what he did. So he validated a lot of what was. So his presence, his clarity. And the second thing that was really useful and valuable for me was he validated a lot of inner experiences that I had, which in the real world can occur to people like, is she smoking something? And that's of huge value when you're in the presence of a self-realized being, is that they can, some of them have been there. They've seen they've experienced that different realms of consciousness, and they're able to articulate it in a way that can be shared with others, that other people can benefit from. So that was the other thing. The thing that struck me the most about Sadhguru is how he is so clear about who he is and what he's here to do. And I thought, and it's been many a time since, it comes back into my mind. And I think about that. And I think, the other thing was about his own knowingness about himself, who he is and how clear he is. He doesn't allow doubt to perforate very deeply into his everyday speaking, into his actions, into what he does in the world. And I think we have a lot to learn from that. Now, some people in the world of psychology, we have all these labels for people. Nowadays, all these labels. I'm not saying any of these apply to him, by the way, as a disclaimer. I'm just saying that people who come across as very sure of themselves, people who come across really confidently in what they're saying, and they're knowing, they can be described sometimes by other people as narcissists, as all kinds of we can give them all kinds of psychological sort of labels. But I think what we have to learn from him is we really need to learn not to let doubt be something which guides our actions and guides our everyday existence. we need to, I mean, for me, it's as a woman in particular, I don't know whether it's relevant as much. Men, of course, suffer from doubt, but maybe in a slightly different way sometimes, as far as I can tell, to the way that women do. Women, we suffer a lot from self-doubt. Like the more talented and skilled you are, the more, committed you are to making a difference, the more doubt you can have about yourself, because you can, and it's just one of these things we have to learn not to be given by that. He
That's
has
really
that
cool.
at a supreme level. We need to trust ourselves and our paths, our individual paths, like he does.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what he does. He trusts his path. There are so many critics that he has, so many people have so many things to say about him,
Yes.
but he stays true to himself. And I saw that when I met him. In his energy, there was this very clear stillness.
I'd love to meet him. He seems not only um, full of knowledge, full of wisdom, and full of his own consciousness and self belief, but he also seems quite modern. Because I've seen him attending concerts. I've seen him attending various events, and you think, actually, this is breaking the mold of a typical guru, as people would see, and it's a way of connecting, I think, to this other generation. And so, I think it's fantastic. But from your interview with Sadhguru, what actually struck me was some words that he used around, and I'm looking at my paper here. It says something about aligning what you do on the inside and the outside. And
This is
this
what we're
is
talking
where,
about.
yeah, this is where my biggest misalignment was in life. And
Mm.
so I think when I go back to my framework of coaching, when I talk about everything, sleep, nutrition, exercise, community, etc., 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 one of the most powerful things that's changed me through a lady called Lisa Butcher was going on the inside. And I think Sadhguru depicts that really well, and that's what resonates with me.
That's exactly right, Sanjeev. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. Was I use the word integration, because it is about kind of having the two become a thing in their own right. The physical, the material, the emotional, all of that, with the higher consciousness. And I think we can't we become better humans by listening to higher consciousness. We become better humans by granting its existence as real, because it becomes such a huge guiding force in our life. And that's when you don't go wrong.
So, Smita, I think we've done a lot of talk about going internal and self-discovery. We've not even covered terms such as karma, chakra in that much depth at the moment. But I think what we've gone into has been really deep. Where I would like to go to next is there's actually two areas. Before I go to yoga, you mentioned previously reincarnation and past lives. Who's the admiral in the French Navy?
You've read the book. Oh my
I do my
God.
research. I do my research.
Amazing. Oh, wow.
No, no,
That
I think
is
everyone would love to hear this story.
the way that happened was unbelievable. So that admiral in the French Navy turns out an incarnation that I actually had. And I did not know why. So it came about as a result of me drawing. There was a period when I came back from a sabbatical in India, and I just started working in the Indian IT industry, and it was not a thing at the time. It was there was only two companies that were working on this, and I happened to be with the smaller one, the startup. Took me 6 months to get that job. I was determined to be in that industry. I don't know why, but again, guided by this inner voice. But alongside of that, when I came back from India, I was driving back one day from work, and suddenly a shop that had been there all my life, because I lived in that area, was an art shop in Eastcote High Street. And my eye caught was suddenly went to the shop as I was driving by, and something said to me, "You need to go in there and buy yourself some things." So I'm like, "What? Okay, I'll go in there." And it was just a feeling, and I went in and came home, and then I had this, like, it was as if my hands wanted to make these designs or do something, like paint something, didn't know what. Eventually, I ended up making what are known as mandalas. I did not know I was making mandalas at the time, but they're called mandals actually. And they are these very intricate geometric designs that are a representation of it's like how higher self can speak to you sometimes. You know, realm of consciousness, Atman has its own language, and, you know, art and things like that is one very small element of it. So I was doing these and I didn't know where I knew to do them from, and so on and so on. And I made like prolifically, they were all over my flat at the time, like pinned to the, you know, glue tacked to the wall. And there was one that I was making, and it suddenly became something that started to bring up a lot of emotion in me. And not just emotion, but like seriously fear and terror. And I don't know, I had to stop working on it because it was just too intense and I didn't know what to do with it. But so I put it away in another room because it was a bit disturbing to me that going past it and stuff. And then what happened was, it was still there. It was still there, connected to me somehow, and I couldn't put it down. So I was intrigued and I was disturbed. And the only thing that I knew to do was then to go into meditation with a notebook, go deep into meditation and ask my higher self questions like, what is this? Why is this happening? You know, why is this what I named it symbol of terror at the end of the day? Why is this symbol of terror making me feel so afraid? Like, why is it bringing up so much? Like it's happening to me now, emotion in me. And that's when things started to happen. So my higher self said to me, literally said, go to a library in Victoria. At the time, the British Library in Victoria the British Library had a presence near in Victoria, but they were just moving. So I thought, British Library, what is that? I never heard of it, but I found them in the directories because we didn't have Google in those days. And I called them up and I said, do you have a center in Victoria? They said, we did, but now we're moved to, you know, Euston Road. So that's where I ended up going. Didn't know what I was looking for, but I had a clue in my guidance, and the clue was go and find a mathematician who was an admiral. And that's all I had the clue. I didn't have any timing. I didn't know the name or anything. So I went to the librarian and I said, I'm looking for this. And he said, I know exactly who I think you mean. I was like, what? How could you know? But that's what good librarians do. You know, they are so geeky in a sense. That's why they're there. So I ended up being guided to this place within the back and beyond of this library, at the top of the shelves. And we got this book out by this guy. I didn't use his real name because I don't have permission from his current family, but I changed his name. And we got the book, and it turns out he was an admiral, a vice admiral in the French Navy, and just in the 1800s at some point, and then into 1900s. And then he, while he was doing all of his travels and everything, he was deeply into geometry, particularly. And he was into mathematics. So he was researching and also astronomy. And that was when we had the situation on the beach of Thailand at Wako Beach, where there was an event which he was leading, which was in fact one of the first times we discovered that we are made of stars, and why and how hydrogen is working on, you know, to create the flares, the solar flares and so on. Because before that, people thought that there was, you know, the solar flares that were happening on the sun was souls going to sun, you know, dying and going there and then burning up and stuff like that. So that was when they discovered the phrase, we are made of stars. They absolutely knew through the experiments that they did back in the day, because before, so his mathematical prowess and interest, and him being a vice admiral, gave him a lot of leeway to become somebody who was able to be in different parts of the world when events happened. Back in the day, the prestige amongst nations was in astronomy, to discover new things in astronomy. And so they discovered through one of the eclipses that was taking place in Thailand, which was another story in and of itself. The whole thing was arranged by somebody, the King Thai at the time, called Rama IV, whom we know, his real name was King Mongkut, and whom we know to be the King and I with Yul Brynner in that amazing TV series. Now it's actually currently in the West End as well. So that admiral was a direct previous lifetime of mine.
Wow.
And I didn't discover that until later, when I was actually again in the same meditation, guided to go to see somebody called Chris Griscom, who turns out was an expert and only person on the planet who had a system, and it wasn't regression, it was a system of connecting into the Akashic records. The Akashic records is nothing other than the consciousness, aspects of our library, if you could say. It's a part of this Atman, Brahman consciousness, where everything that happens and everything that is happening, everything that is likely to happen is in there. And you can access that. And so she guided me through her very specific process to connect to my higher self in a way where my higher self could take me back in time to access some of the memories that were really relevant to my lifetime now, and which were actually concurrently running the show.
Wow.
So that was the Admiral.
Yeah, I don't. I'm dumbfounded by that, to be honest. And it talks a lot to what a lot of family and relatives, especially previous generations, have talked to me about past life. About they use stuff like kundlis to predict how your past life may affect your future life. And I'm not even going to attempt to go into that in this episode. But I think
that's astrology. That's Vedic astrology. We can talk about that another time if you want. But yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, and I've sat in front of people who will say, look, based upon events in your past life, this is what's going to happen in the future. And I've always wanted to understand that, but I can't do a discredit by just bolting it onto this episode. We'll explore that separately, I think.
Can I just complete that, Sanjeev, by saying that if we were to understand just one analogy, maybe it will help to understand how this consciousness works. Okay, that the realm of consciousness works. Okay, so let's take a building. You're going to make this incredibly ornate building. The building is never going to happen just like that. There's going to be a blueprint. First of all, we have this idea of this thing. Then we have a blueprint. Then we create some more concrete designs around what this building might look like. Then we go into more detail of what that building's going to include. And then eventually the building gets built. What are you going to build it with and all the rest of it? Then eventually, so if you imagine that this realm of consciousness is that blueprint and before, okay? It's before the blueprint, but the blueprint arises out of that space of consciousness, because it doesn't just happen. And then we start to get a little bit more granular with it, and more and more and more. And then it happens. And then we have a place. And then we have all these objects in that place that start to clutter, that we put inside, and that, that grow and that have a life of their own. And that's really my analogy of how this realm of consciousness becomes a human being, how the human being then gathers all of these bits and pieces that it stores away in the attic, forgets that it has all these. We forget we have all these objects and all these little things. And then one day but we don't realize we can actually go into that attic. And if we were skilled at accessing that attic, we could actually go and find the book that I found. We could actually go and track down that person that lived, perhaps.
Right.
And so on. So it's really no more than that. And everything that is manifested in the material world is merely a reflection of the macro.
Yeah. I'm not sure I want to go into my attic, to be honest, and find out. Well, this
And you shouldn't. Nobody should go there unless absolutely necessary. Just like writing a book, don't bother doing that unless you have to.
the place where I'd like to go next, and almost finally, is Karma and Diamonds. Very interesting title for a book. Do you want to just explain what that title means and what it underpins?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a holding title until we came up with the real title for the book. Okay, and the agent I was working with at the time said, "Why did you call it Karma and Diamonds? For the time being, until we have a proper title for it." I was like, "Okay," and I thought, "Wow!" It just grew and grew and grew into its own thing. So why karma? Because I'm talking in the books about how the past, in this lifetime, but also not realizing that it was going to take me back into previous existences in order to actually fulfill my commitment of getting to the bottom of why events were happening in my life, why patterns were there in my life the way they were. And when I asked the question to my higher self, that's what ended up happening. So when we do, the books are really sharing a journey and talking about how that journey can go, at least for me it has, and it can go for many people, is how do we bring our past into a state of completion so that we can actually, at least completion to the point of where you're not going to change the past, but you can allow it to be as it is, and you can learn everything that's possible for the moment, such that you can be informed by it for the future. And you're not automatically going to create what's gone before into the future. So when somebody tells you, based on your past, this is your future, that's exactly what I don't want. I don't want anything that to be there only because it's been my past, because a lot of our past is not what we want to repeat, but we will repeat it until we get why the repetition is happening. What is there to learn from that? So that's the karma part. And karma is a very deep concept. We'll have another conversation, if you like, about that, because it's very little understood by most people in East or West. And then the diamonds part was when I first heard the voice of the inner being. It was when I was only 7 years old. And at that moment, I had this sensation of little diamonds rising up my spine, like flashes of diamond-like light. So I started to call it my diamond when I heard that voice. And then I call it my inner diamond, that higher self voice. I call the higher self the inner diamond because it's so multifaceted and because it's so pure and clear that it refracts the light of knowledge through it.
So the
So
self is
that's
the
one
diamond.
aspect of it.
The self is the diamond.
The self is the diamond.
Yeah.
The self is the diamond, pure diamond. It's treasure, it's everything you could ever want. And then the third aspect of the diamond, or second aspect of the diamond, third aspect of the title, is that the whole purpose for writing the books was to be able to become somebody who felt like a complete misfit in this world to becoming someone really masterful at being able to be in relationships. And that was my journey. I'm not saying I have mastered it. I'm saying that's my journey. And so the diamonds then is also these diamonds, relationships and that special relationship. So I went from having relationships that were clearly not the ones to going into a relationship, which is way beyond anything that I could ever imagine. And is absolutely the biggest gift in my life. So, the diamonds relate to both creating material wealth, creating relationships, and higher self as my wealth, and then the karmic element to complete the past so we can create a fresh future from nothing.
Amazing, amazing. Now I fully understand the title and it makes absolute sense. How do people get hold of Karma and Diamonds, and how do people get hold of you? What are your coordinates?
Right. So I'm on books are on Amazon. They're in all formats. We have them in paperback. We have them in audio, and in digital. We have meditations attached to those that are not on Amazon, but but if they go to my website, they can get the whole package. So I went to great trouble to create journeys such as swimming with wild dolphins off the coast of Hawaii. Where I bring very deep connection to the dolphins, but just in a very easy, enjoyable way. So somebody who doesn't meditate can easily just enjoy that relaxation and visualization, and still connect to themselves. And all of my meditations are about connecting to the higher self without trying, in an easy, effortless, joyful way. So we have that on my website, smitajoshi.com. And then Instagram, I'm Smita Joshi 108. I'm Smita Joshi 108 on TikTok. On my YouTube channel, find me just with my name, or the Self-Discovery channel. I have a lot of content there.
Fantastic.
So I think those are 3 places.
Failing that, turn up at David Lloyd in Northwood in the corner. You'll see Smita writing some books.
Nowadays, you'll find me at a yoga studio in central London somewhere. Yeah.
Smita, that's been absolutely amazing. I think I've clearly not covered as much as I wanted to. That's because each topic is so insightful, and we can go deep into it. But I think the key thing that I've learned when I go back to what I'm trying to do, helping people around my age grow young, is that what I failed with and what got me into problem situation was I was always physically pretty fit. I was quite robust, and I was a go-getter. So I was doing the things that are external quite well, but I wasn't listening to my internal voice, my internal self. I've been through the pain of being forced to listen to that. And what I'd like people to take from your learnings and from what we've talked about is that there are signals where your inner voice talks to you, where your inner voice kind of tells you that there's a bit of a dissonance between what Sadhguru says, the inside and the outside world. You need to tap into that and listen to that and process that. And I think if you can do that, you start becoming that diamond that you talk about.
And that would be a conversation in its own right. We did start with that conversation and never got to how we actually, the ways to do it and what gets in the way and what to look out for, the pitfalls. That's a whole conversation for itself, really. And it's worth having at some point.
Yeah, I don't think I can do justice to that on a podcast. What I foresee is a small seminar and a small group of people where we actually talk to them about it in person, because some of these things I think are great for a podcast, but some of them are quite practical, which through practical facilitation is a stronger means to do it. And I think I will try and organize that.
Definitely. That'd be amazing, Sanjeev. Definitely amazing. And I'm so honored to be on your podcast. I know this podcast is going places. We're really excited about what we're doing every week. No, I mean, the conversations you're having are very profound. And, I really want to acknowledge you for how fast you have transformed. Like, you're transforming yourself. That's extraordinary.
I think I think the key thing there, Smita, is, and it's in my framework, and you've talked about it, I'm not really thinking about it, to be honest. I think once you start saying in 3 months' time, I'm going to do X, 6 months' time, I'm going to do Y, my corporate brain has taught me that when you achieve that, when you get there, it's either disappointing, it doesn't feel what you thought it'd feel like, or you didn't get there, so you lose confidence. And so the journey that I'm on goes back to something that you said earlier, which is that you just continuously got to try and get into a loop where you have continuous improvements every day and increase that kind of baseline on autopilot. And that's all I'm trying to do. And I think it's in line with everything you've said. And let's keep chatting, let's keep talking. And I encourage everyone to follow Smita's profiles, especially on Instagram, because I am a bit of an Instagram stalker of your profile, Smita. I find your videos amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Smita, that was great. Thank you for joining.